All right, so the next section that we're going to discuss is going to be evolution, the unifying theme in biology. The theory of evolution is considered to be a core concept of biology because it explains both the relatedness or the similarities of living organisms and the diversity of living organisms. So, for example, the similarities. All living things are going to be composed primarily of 6 elements. Whether we are talking about mushrooms or funguses, bacteria, plants, humans, everything is composed of these 6 core elements. However, we get a huge amount of diversity in that life. I said, mushrooms, plants, protozoan, algae, human beings, so much diversity in both form and function is found throughout life. And a lot of this comes down to this process that we've already discussed of natural selection, where groups or populations that have similarities can branch out, adapt, diversify based on their environmental conditions. So because of this great diversity of life, scientists have a need to classify and organize life to kind of help clarify our work, help us give us a better understanding of living relationships. So this branch of study is called taxonomy. It's just used to help us explain and understand evolutionary relationships. With this branch, organisms that have the greatest similarity are going to be grouped together. Organisms that are more diverse are going to be found in more separate categories. And we're going to use several classification systems that have been proposed throughout times. We're going to use one classification system in particular. This classification system that we're going to be using is going to include 3 domains. The 3 domains that we can use to break down and study all living organisms are going to be bacteria, Archaea, and Eukarya. And I'm going to change my pointer quickly. I'm going to give me a laser pointer so I can kind of help direct and point out. So our 3 domains that we are going to be using are going to be bacteria, Archaea, and Eukarya. Bacteria is going to be a domain in which all organisms are going to be unicellular prokaryotic organisms. Archaea is going to have unicellular prokaryotic organisms as well, but they're going to be found in slightly different environments. Eukarya is going to be comprised of organisms that have eukaryotic cells. And we're going to branch out and explain what each one of those mean. So when we're looking at their domains, like I said, we're going to start off with our domain bacteria. Each one of these organisms found in the domain bacteria are going to be, as we said before, unicellular. Does anybody know what that means? Here I'm going to pause for dramatic effect so you can pause the video and fill in or write down on your sheet, what does unicellular mean? We're also going to be unicellular prokaryotic cells. Does anybody know, or have you found in your reading, what does prokaryotic mean? This is another great chance to fill in or pipe up during our group discussions. But prokaryotic cells, bacteria are going to be unicellular prokaryotic cells. Prokaryotic simply means that the cells are lacking a membrane-bound nucleus or membrane-bound organelles. And we're going to talk in great length about the difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. But for now, just understand that prokaryotic cells do not have a membrane-bound nucleus. They also don't have those little organelles. If you remember from biology class that you may have taken in high school or in middle school, you may have seen the structure of a cell, and you remember all those little organisms that are found in there. The nucleus, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, the Golgi bodies, all those little organelles, those are not going to be found in a prokaryotic cell. So prokaryotic cells lacking a membrane-bound nucleus or organelles. Another interesting fact about bacteria is they are found everywhere, and by everywhere, I mean everywhere. The air, the soil, water, on your skin, in your gut, in your mouth. Bacteria are found virtually everywhere. These are going to be ubiquitous. Some are going to be harmful. Some are going to be beneficial and helpful. Some of them we need to live, like our gut bacteria. Some are going to be very dangerous, but they're going to be found absolutely everywhere. Similarly, we have the domain Archaea. Archaea is also going to be unicellular and prokaryotic. And just refresher, what does prokaryotic mean? Prokaryotic means without a membrane-bound nucleus or organelles. So they are going to be unicellular and prokaryotic. However, unlike bacteria, they are not going to be found everywhere. Archaea are what we like to call extremophiles. Extreme meaning extreme, but the phile part is Greek for meaning loving. So extremophiles, they love extreme environments. Archaea are going to be the little unicellular organisms that you're going to find in the depths of the ocean, where there's so much pressure nothing else can survive. You're going to find Archaea in sulfur vents. You're going to find them in volcanoes. You're going to find them at the tops of mountains where there's so little air pressure nothing else can survive. So these are going to be our extremophiles. They are going to be found in all kinds of environments across the world where the environment is very primitive or very extreme, unable to support other forms of life. All right, and then our last domain is going to be domain Eukarya. Eukarya is interesting. They're going to be slightly different. These organisms can be either unicellular or multicellular. Quick, throw out a reference. Throwaway question. What's the difference again between unicellular and multicellular, and what kinds of organisms are humans? Are we unicellular or multicellular? But eukarya can be either unicellular or multicellular organisms. They are also going to be made out of eukaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells are going to be a little bit different than prokaryotic cells. These are going to be membrane cells that contain membrane-bound organelles and a membrane-bound nucleus. These are going to be the cells that you're very familiar with, or you should have seen before in a previous biology class, with all those little organelles, all those structures. Those are going to be our eukaryotic cells. Now, the eukarya is going to actually be very complex creatures. And because of this, these contain all the other categories that we recognize as life forms. We're going to have to divide these further into subcategories. So we're going to take this complex domain eukarya and we're going to break it down a little bit further to help us explain the relationships and the classifications of these organisms. Before we break that down any further, I do want to talk about our classification process. So we can break down that group of eukaryotes. We can break them down into kingdoms. We can then further divide them into phylums, then into classes, down into orders, into families, into the genus, and then finally into the various species. Now, there's a very good chance that you will see this question somewhere on your final exam and or in your homework, where I'll ask you to list the classifications of these eukaryotes in order. So one way that you can help memorize this order of kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species is to use a mnemonic device. The mnemonic device that I was taught in school was King Philip cried out for goodness sake. So that's how I remember the order: kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. There are a bunch of other mnemonic devices that you can use. Here are some of the more appropriate ones that I have seen. King Philip came over from Germany swimming. King Philip came over for good spaghetti. King Philip came over for grape soda. So on and so forth. Feel free to use any of these that may help you remember the order. Or I'm sure there are other ones that are maybe not quite as school friendly that you can look up and use. I don't care what you use as long as you can learn that order of the classifications of species. So we're going to break down those different kingdoms a little bit further. So as we've mentioned, the domain eukarya can be broken down further. The first kingdom that we're going to be looking at is going to be the kingdom of protists. Protists are going to be our unicellular organisms. What we're going to find is, as we are breaking down our various kingdoms, we're going to see that we can classify these organisms based on their size, whether they're unicellular or multicellular. We're also going to break them down based on how they obtain their nutrients from their environment. So protists have the unique ability of being able to absorb their nutrients externally, digest them internally, or actually photosynthesize and produce their own raw materials. And so those are going to be our protists. A great example of these would be things like protozoans, algae, or diatoms. Algae are often considered or classified as plants. They actually aren't. Algae are going to be protists. They're a slightly different organism than those found in the kingdom Plantae. So next up on our list is going to be fungi. Funguses can actually be unicellular or multicellular. So we're going to classify them based on their size, of course, but there can be unicellular or multicellular. However, funguses can only absorb their food. So this means that they must secrete some sort of digestive substance into whatever it is they're going to be consuming, break it down, and then absorb it once it has already sort of been externally digested. So that's how funguses obtain their nutrients from the environment. Plants are going to be multicellular and photosynthetic, meaning that they don't digest their food, they instead produce their food. They're going to use raw materials like solar energy and water and minerals obtained from the soil in order to produce their own food and energy source. And then finally, animals is going to be the last kingdom of the domain Eukarya. Animal kingdom is going to be multicellular, and they're going to digest their food internally, meaning that they have to obtain their food from the environment. They're going to, bring it in, slurp it in, suck it up, and digest that food internally, break it down into its smaller components so it can be absorbed into the bloodstream. And those are going to be our kingdoms of the domain Eukarya. Just because our main organism of study for this class is going to be the human, I would like you to know the classifications for us as humans. So our domain is going to be Eukarya. Our kingdom is going to be the animal kingdom, of course, because we are multicellular organisms that must digest our food internally. Next, we belong to the phylum of chordates. Now, this phylum, chordates, simply means that we have a nerve cord protected by our spinal column. Our class, further from that, is going to be mammals. We're mammals because we have hair and we have mammary glands to feed milk to our live young. Our order is going to be primates because of our forward-directed eyes and our large developed brains. And then the last three categories of classification are going to be our family Hominids, genus Homo, and our species Sapien. And these last three categories are classified by in reference to our skeletal and dental characteristics. I don't expect you to know all of our reasons for each one of the classifications, but I would like you to know that for the human, our domain is Eukarya, our kingdom is animal, our phylum chordates, our class mammals, order primates, family hominids, and genus Homo, and finally our species is going to be Sapien or Homo sapien. And that is going to be it for our classification.